In the frozen hell of the Eastern Front, where temperatures plunged to -40 degrees Celsius and frostbite claimed more lives than bullets, survival wasn't about bravery. It was about ingenuity. Soldiers learned quickly that no coat or campfire could hold back the cold forever. What mattered was insulation, and it had to come from the ground up. That's where a mysterious method began circulating among trapped battalions, a design so effective it was whispered in diaries, not manuals. They called it the warm tomb. Discovered years later in a recovered soldier's field diary, it described a 3-layer shelter built from nothing but earth, snow and ash, and it kept men alive where tents and trenches failed. Before we dig into this ingenious system, make sure to subscribe to In the Beginning, where long-forgotten wartime tactics and survival methods are brought back to life, tested and explained for those who value real field wisdom over theory. When trenches froze solid, soldiers turned to the ground itself. By 1942, the front lines across Eastern Europe had turned into a frozen wasteland. Trenches that once provided cover were now death traps, their walls encased in ice and their floors slick with frozen mud. Canvas tents tore apart under the weight of snow, and campfires betrayed positions to enemy snipers. Amid this chaos, soldiers realized that the only consistent source of insulation wasn't above them. It was beneath their boots. In one Soviet and 2 German diaries, later found near Stalingrad, engineers described a makeshift bunker method, born from necessity 3 layers of natural materials, arranged in a sequence that trapped heat, blocked moisture, and deflected cold air. It became known among surviving troops as the warm tomb, not because it was grim, but because it worked so well it felt like being buried in safety, a shelter where death couldn't reach. The first layer was the foundation, packed earth. Soldiers dug about a metre deep into the frozen ground, just enough to reach the layer where soil held steady warmth below the frost line. Once cleared, they packed the bottom and sides tightly with dirt, creating a half-barrel shape, or, a shallow pit. This earthen chamber absorbed body heat slowly and radiated it back over time, maintaining a near-constant internal temperature. The second layer was the insulating wall made from snow and straw, or whatever fibrous material could be scavenged. This was where the secret lay. Soldiers realized that snow, when compacted with straw or grass, created air pockets that trapped heat. They packed this mix around the earthen chamber in layers about 20 to 30 centimetres thick. If straw wasn't available, dry moss or bundled fabric worked. Finally came the ceiling layer, a mix of ash and mud spread over the top and sides. This combination hardened like primitive cement when frozen. The ash helped repel moisture and acted as a crude antibacterial barrier, while the mud sealed cracks that might leak warm air. When complete, the shelter looked like a low mound, blending seamlessly into the landscape. Inside, 2 men could lie down shoulder to shoulder, shielded from the wind and invisible to patrols. The genius of the design wasn't just physical insulation, it was the chemistry at play. Ash, when mixed with damp soil, undergoes a slow exothermic reaction that releases mild heat as it dries. In freezing conditions, this tiny heat boost was enough to raise internal temperatures by several degrees. Combined with the trapped body warmth and the air pockets in the straw snow layer, it created a small, self-regulating microclimate. Field reports suggest that when the outside temperature reached -25 degrees Celsius, the inside of a warm tomb could hold steady around -2 degrees. It wasn't comfortable, but it was survivable. Warm enough to prevent hypothermia, dry enough to preserve rations, and sealed enough to muffle sound. For exhausted soldiers with frostbitten hands, it was the closest thing to safety they could build. The same method can be replicated today using natural materials. In a survival situation where tents or modern gear fail, the three-layer system still functions perfectly. Start by digging a shallow trench or pit roughly 1 meter deep. This ensures that your shelter draws from the stable thermal layer underground. Next, pack the walls with an insulating mix: snow and straw, snow and leaves, or snow and dry grass. Compact it firmly so it holds shape. Then create your outer seal using mud mixed with ash or fine soil. If you can find wood ash from a fire, stir it into wet earth until it forms a paste. Apply this paste over the surface of the mound to form a crust. When it freezes, it locks in place, turning the structure nearly airtight. Always leave a small vent hole near the top for airflow. Finally, insulate the floor using dry leaves, pine needles, or even spare clothing. A single candle chemical hand, warmer, or small heat source inside will quickly raise the temperature as the layers reflect and retain warmth. This method isn't just historical curiosity. It's a lesson in thermodynamics disguised as survival engineering. Conventional tents failed because they lost heat to air exchange and condensation. Dugouts without insulation filled with moisture and froze solid. The warm tomb solved both problems by combining principles of geology, insulation and sealing in one structure. The ground layer stabilized temperature, the insulating layer slowed heat loss, and the ash-mud coating prevented air leaks. Soldiers described it as sleeping under the earth's breath. Unlike metal stoves or open fires that exposed positions, this shelter required no flame to stay functional. That made it, well, just invaluable for reconnaissance units, sappers and scouts working behind enemy lines. It could be built with almost no tools, completely camouflaged, and left behind with no trace once the snow melted. When historians found the original diary fragments in the late 20th century, they revealed detailed sketches and field notes that matched independent accounts from Finnish, German and Soviet troops. Despite being from opposing sides, all three referenced similar techniques, suggesting that this method spread organically through observation and necessity. The warm tomb wasn't just a shelter. It was proof of shared human ingenuity across enemy lines. Men who would have killed each other in battle unknowingly learned from one another to survive nature's cruelty. That truth alone adds weight to the name Warmth in Death's Shadow, unity in desperation. For those studying fieldcraft or preparing for winter survival, the warm tomb remains one of the simplest and most effective shelter systems ever developed. It requires no technology, no advanced materials, only knowledge and effort. Modern insulation foams and reflective blankets follow the same principle: trap air, seal heat, stabilize temperature. Yet this technique did it all with soil, snow and ash nearly a century ago. If there's one lesson history gives through this diary, it's that innovation often comes from desperation. The soldiers who built these tombs weren't engineers or scientists. They were men trying not to freeze to death. But their methods live on as practical wisdom for anyone facing the elements today. If you value lost wartime ingenuity and survival knowledge too valuable to stay buried, subscribe to In the Beginning. Share this with other history and survival enthusiasts who appreciate the real lessons written not in books, but in the field, by those who had no choice but to get it right.